Does OC Kellen Moore want the New Orleans Saints head coaching job? New Orleans yet to make a decision on a coaching search. Ladies and gentlemen, the backdrop is Matt Moscona. And listen to me right now. It is Friday night. I'm filming this video. News has come out, and I am confident that that news is the puzzle piece that we need to basically confirm that Kellen Moore will be the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to lay it all out for you, and then we're going to react to Matt's video. First, I'm going to lay it out. Okay, so a few tweets hit while I was out. I went and had dinner at Good Catch, one of my favorite Thai restaurants in New Orleans. If you are looking for good Thai food, they're incredible. So Good Catch, very good stuff. So this tweet came out. Tom Pelissero, the Saints plan to meet again with Eagles Kellen Moore after the Super Bowl. A strong sign he's the top candidate for the team's head coaching job. So, I mean, this is way up there with the stars aligning, right? Like, if there was no interest, then there wouldn't be a plan to meet again after the Super Bowl. After the Super Bowl, things can get officially official with Kellen Moore. So this news doesn't come out unless there's... This is basically saying that the Saints plan to offer Kellen Moore a contract and discuss the contract and all that stuff after the Super Bowl. There's more information in here about that on NFL.com. It also talks about Kellen Moore beginning to put together a staff, okay? Nick Underhill, our boy. Every indication we've gathered is that Kellen Moore's the top candidate. Mickey Loomis informed their candidates that the process for hiring a coach won't be complete until after the Super Bowl. No final decisions, but if the Saints and Kellen Moore were to reach an agreement, they can't do so until after the Super Bowl. We understand that. And now the biggest piece. Ian Rappaport. As the Saints zero in on Kellen Moore, interim coach Darren Rizzi is likely / expected to become the new Broncos special teams coordinator. Now, why is this a big deal? Because Darren Rizzi is the backup. He's the security blanket. He is the guy that's going to be there if all else fails, if Moore goes somewhere else or whatever, then Darren Rizzi is going to be the head coach of the Saints. This is basically saying Rizzi knows Moore is going to be the next head coach. This is basically saying Darren Rizzi has his next spot lined up, just waiting on things to become official. Once things become official, Rizzi is moving on. Rizzi's heading to Denver. Okay, so huge news. Huge news here. This is the tweet about Kellen Moore with his staff. Moore's been working on staff. He can't be officially hired, but you know all that. So with all of that said, it's pretty much lined up to where after the Super Bowl, the New Orleans Saints will meet with Kellen Moore again, like laid out in that tweet. They will go over the contract. Moore will then begin to put together his staff, which we have heard Doug Nussmeier is apparently going to be the OC, and we've heard rumors that Brandon Staley could be the DC. All right. The Nussmeier thing sounds more official than the Staley thing, but we'll see. So what isn't going to happen, from what it sounds to me, is that we're not going to have tomorrow or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, we're not going to have breaking news one way or the other. It's pretty much going to be unofficially official until the Super Bowl or until after the Super Bowl when they meet again, and then we'll probably get terms and we'll probably get the announcement. So this is news to my ear. This is the happiest thing or the best thing I could hear on a Friday night. I mean, this is the moment where you start just singing. You just start singing church hymns. Our God is an awesome God. They just start whatever you want to sing. This is the moment. This is it. Now, we're going to counterbalance the positivity and the good news with the Skrmetta. So we'll hear what he has to say about this. Now, his show is going to be, during the day on Friday. So he doesn't have the breaking news information that we just laid out there. So keep that in mind. But we shall react and review.
Admittedly, I am a bit surprised by the reaction that many of you are having to my reaction of this story. The Saints, to catch you up.
So we're in the middle of a reactception. So he's reacting to the audience's reaction to his reaction that I'm now reacting to. So a penta reaction.
Effectively, the Saints have not hired a coach yet, and it seems like they're still going to continue conversations after the Super Bowl. And the reaction from some has been, but Matt, they can't hire a coach until after the Super Bowl. Right. They can't formally hire a coach until after the Super Bowl. It is, however, very common practice to have a deal in place with coaches that you intend to hire before their season ends.
Yeah, this coach is in the Super Bowl. Like, this coach is coaching in the Super Bowl. So I don't think it's crazy if he's like, look, I don't want to get bogged down in legalities. I don't want to get bogged down in reading contracts. I don't want to get bogged down on negotiating. I don't want to get bogged down on any of that. I want to focus on winning the Super Bowl, and then I'll focus on that. I think that is more than fair for both sides to not get worried about that. I mean, think about what's actually, when it comes to an actual contract with like a player or a coach, you are talking about millions of dollars. You're talking about, I can't even imagine how many pages these contracts are. I can't imagine how many lawyers are involved, how many sign here areas there are. So the fact that Moore probably said, I don't even want to think about this. I don't even want to think about the 200 pages of a contract. And with that, if that's the case, then I won't be able to negotiate. So I don't want to talk about any of that until after the Super Bowl. I think that's more than fair.
I will point your attention to 1 year ago with the New Orleans Saints. On February the 2nd, which was the Friday of the Senior Bowl. There was Cat Terrell, ESPN.com, February 2nd, 2024. Saints plan to hire 49ers Clint Kubiak as OC, sources say. There it is right there.
Yeah.
February 2nd. Oh, by the way, Kubiak was coaching the Niners in the Super Bowl.
Is a little different, for sure. An offensive coordinator versus a quarterback's coach or whatever else. Like, there is a difference there. There is also personal preference. There is also, there's a lot that goes into this. I can see it both ways. We see some coaches in college who say, well, I don't want to do any of that before the bowl game. I want to coach my guys, do the bowl game, whatever. Then you see some other guys say, shit, I'll leave before the bowl game. Who cares? So we are, again, like, I know he doesn't have this information, but this is pretty close to that. Like, the information we're getting now is pretty close to sources say Saints plan to hire Kellen Moore. That's pretty much what we just read on those tweets.
Schefter reported it. So it's very common that happens.
Yeah.
I had somebody on Twitter say,
yeah,
well, they can't because you get hit with tampering and you can lose a draft pick like what happened with the Eagles and Cardinals last year. No. Pay attention. A year ago, Arizona and Philly swapped third-round picks because the Cardinals tampered. What they did was they had a phone call with Jonathan Gannon during the no-contact period. That violated the NFL's anti-tampering policy, having that contact during the no-contact period. There is a period in which teams can go talk to coaches even who are still coaching. That's why the Saints flew to Philadelphia on Monday and talked to Kellen Moore.
Yes.
There's a period where you can speak to a coach who is still coaching. It's how this process has to go. The Cardinals a year ago had a phone call with Gannon during an impermissible time. Their GM apologized for it, acknowledged mistakes. The two teams, he called the Bidwells, apologized. The two teams made an agreement, and they essentially just swapped picks in the third round. There is nothing.
So is Matt? I'm a little confused here. Is he saying that he is confused why the Saints have not informally hired Kellen Moore? Is that what the argument is? Because again, I would assume that the argument or not the argument, the reality is they haven't done the terms, the contract, the actual like offer, because it's a head coaching offer. It's a big deal. He probably wants to take his time and doesn't want to get involved or doesn't want it to be a distraction or whatever. I mean, I think that is the most reasonable, obvious explanation that shouldn't surprise anybody.
To prohibit the Saints during their conversations with Kellen Moore to offer him the job. Nothing. He cannot formally accept and become the Saints coach until after the season's over, which would be after the Super Bowl a week from Sunday. But Schefter can still report it, or whoever those people are that would report it. There's nothing this is commonplace. So today, all that's set up to tell you what happened today. Diana Rossini, very reputable, at the Senior Bowl.
So we had a video on Rossini's. We had a video on Rossini's report. We watched her podcast. We did the whole thing. She walked back what she said pretty much 10 seconds after saying it in the report. She says that Kellen Moore, or the rumor is that he is unsure because of the Saints quarterback room. In the same report, she says, but that's been worked out. They seem to be good. Like it all seems to be resolved. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. All roads lead to Kellen Moore.
And on her podcast, reported that none of the Saints candidates, as of now, have been told they're out of the running.
Yeah.
Which would suggest there isn't a final answer. Rossini also reported that the scuttlebutt, her word, is that Kellen Moore may not want the job, quote, due to the fact that the Saints don't have a quarterback in place. She went on to say later that Kellen Moore, however, may have come around to the job anyway.
Yeah.
So that was Diana Rossini on her podcast. A few hours later on Friday, Tom Pelissero reports that the New Orleans Saints still have not made a decision on who they're going to hire, and that they plan to speak to Kellen Moore again after the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Which is when they'll offer him the deal.
All of that is to suggest they haven't made their choice.
Oh, they've made their choice.
They could be leaning toward Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore may still be the guy. As a matter of fact, if you made me guess today, of course I think he's the guy, because if he wasn't, and they were sold on Rizzi or Kafka, they could have hired him already.
Yeah, this is classic. I don't know if you ever watched Love is Blind, but this is classic strategy of Kellen Moore is not officially the coach. So there is a chance, albeit what seems to be a low chance, there is a chance that he could say no, right? So just like in Love is Blind, you don't go tell your other suitors, hey, I'm already getting engaged. I'm already getting hitched, so y'all can go ahead and up the road just in case you don't get hitched, right? Until his signature is on the line, they don't have to do nothing. And I wouldn't do nothing. I think Nick Underhill, let me check. Nick put it well. Where is Nicholas? Here we go. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm told that Darren Rizzi will wait out the Saints process, and Denver has not yet requested to interview him. He would be the favorite for the Broncos, but for now, things are on hold until the Saints close their process. Yeah, like this is saying that they're waiting till everything is like official. They're waiting till the ink dries. Rizzi is going to be the Broncos special teams coordinator, but until Kellen Moore says no doubt about it, I am absolutely 100% the coach, he's not leaving. That doesn't mean that he's not going to take the job, right? Everything is just being very formally done. So that's all this is. And that's why the Saints haven't officially told Kafka or Rizzi or whoever else, hey, Kellen Moore's going to be our head coach, because they don't know if he's going to be the head coach, even though it seems like they do kind of know, wink, wink. But they're not going to, what is the old adage? They're not going to, put the cart before the horse.
One guy they're waiting on is him. So, okay.
Yeah.
But the problem I have is the indecision. And you can say to me, well, Matt, it's a big decision that they're making here. Take your time, do it right. Okay. What more do you need? If there's no new candidates, and that's the Saints who have said that. They're not interviewing anybody else. They've got their list. Okay. You had a virtual call, and you flew up to Philly and had a 9-hour face-to-face into the wee hours of Tuesday morning with Kellen Moore.
Yeah.
What more are you going to ask him?
The next meeting is going to be about terms, contracts. It's going to be much more about the formal process of, okay, how do you want to do this? How do you want to roll this out? What do you think about your staff? Like it's going to be like it's going to be the actual like in detailed stuff. How he wants to actually do this. How he sees this all playing out. I mean, it makes again like this is not rocket science.
I can't imagine.
The actual coaching part of it, like the head coaching interview, if you will, that part's over. There is not going to be any play design, X's and O's. None of that will be asked during that second conversation. That second conversation will be all about the actual structure of the deal, structure of his, his rollout.
Now, I never hired an NFL head coach, but I have hired people before, and I fired people before. I cannot imagine. Again, I'm not hiring people to pay them millions of dollars to be a coach in the NFL, but I cannot imagine what else you could possibly ask someone after a 9-hour interview.
I mean, it's like the exact same thing as the Aaron Glenn thing, where Aaron Glenn interviews, but then he leaves the building, and then he comes back the next day to sign the contract. Like, he's not going back the next day to answer more questions. He's going back to do the formality and to go through that entire process. I mean, I'm sure, like, if you've ever closed on a house or something like that, like, it takes time. Like, it takes an hour or so to deal with the paperwork and to go through everything and have a lawyer there and whatever else. So that could be like a lengthy, detailed process. So it's not like it's not, Aaron Glenn didn't go back for a second interview. Liam Cohen didn't go back to Jacksonville after he stabbed Tampa Bay in the back. He didn't go back to answer more questions about his offensive schemes. He went back to go over, like, okay, you're going to be the coach. What's that look like? What does the contract look like? Like, what's the rollout? What are the dates? When are you coming down here? What do you want to do? What's your plan for the draft? How do you want to set that up? What do you like? And again, Aaron Glenn, in between those two things happening, he wasn't coaching in the Super Bowl. So if that second, more formal, more contract-oriented conversation, if Kellen Moore said, hey, Mickey, brother, you mind if we time out this thing? If you mind if we time out, I'll give you a okay in good faith or a handshake deal or whatever. But can we pause the conversation until after the Super Bowl? I kind of want to go all in on this whole thing. And if Mickey said, yeah, okay. Mickey sure as hell isn't going to turn around and call Mike Kafka and say, hey, Mike, bad news, brother. Kellen just kind of pseudo accepted the job, so you're out. Buzz off, Buster. Because then what's Mike Kafka going to do? Mike Kafka's going to leak the news, or that news is going to get out, and then it's going to be leaked, and then all of a sudden, that could be a hint. That could be a problem for Kellen, right? And Mickey could be thinking, I'm not doing nothing that could put this in danger of this deal not happening. I'm not running my mouth. I'm not opening my mouth. I'm not making a phone call. I'm just going to sit back, watch the games, enjoy myself until this is over with, and then I'll get back to business when Kellen Moore's more comfortable. Again, not rocket science.
That is stunning to me. And this reeks of indecision. I mean, damn it. Make your decision, be convicted about it, and go. I would rather the Saints have decided after that 9-hour interview that they were bullish on Kellen Moore. This is our guy. You have the silent deal done. You leak it to Schefter, who says, sources say they're leaning toward hiring Kellen Moore, and then boom, it's done after the Super Bowl.
Why leak it?
What I don't like,
if you believe that, like, all leaking it can do at that point is put Kellen Moore in an uncomfortable position of having to be in the locker room and Super Bowl prep with that news being out there. And then he's on Radio Row and he's answering a million questions about being the Saints' next head coach instead of answering a million questions about the Super Bowl. So why leak it? This, I think, is the smart way to handle it. This is the way you'd want the franchise to handle it. You don't want the franchise pulling a Jerry Jones and running to their podcast and leaking the news, or calling Adam Schefter and leaking the news. I'd keep this as close to vest as possible. I'd keep Kellen as comfortable as possible. And then once the Super Bowl's over, resume.
Is after that, Tuesday, here you are 72 hours later, and reports are coming out that maybe he don't want you, but might be coming around on it a little bit. But then the Saints still want to talk to him, but it could be someone else, and they haven't told anybody they're out of the running. Like, all of that suggests a bit of a circus around this thing. And it's not to say you won't get it right, or you can't end up getting it right, or he won't work, or any of that stuff. It just shows a lack of organization. It shows.
I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. I never am. But this doesn't seem like a circus at all to me. Like, now it all seems like it's all pretty much just right there. You're moving all the pieces at the same time. You've told Rizzy. You've obviously had the conversation with Rizzy. Rizzy feels comfortable enough to where that news is relatively leaked that he will be taking the Broncos job if, everything else falls apart. McCarthy obviously got wind of something. He withdraws. So it seems like you're moving all the pieces at the same time that you should be doing in a nice, careful, neat, organized way. This isn't your first time. This isn't your first rodeo. You're getting everything ready, and then you're going to push the magic button when time is right. There you go. The circus would have been you meet with Moore, things go great. He wants to keep it hush-hush, but you run to WWL or whatever, and you go tell somebody, and they're putting it out there, and then Schefter's reporting it, and then Moore's dealing with it at Radio Row, and Kafka's going on his podcast, and Rizzy's doing this, and like, that's the circus. This is to quell the circus.
I mean, go back to what Mickey Loomis said when this job came open. And I know a lot of people have parodied him for it and spoofed him for it when he said, well, it's one of 32 jobs. Yeah, it is. Isn't that why people should be leaping at the opportunity? But when Joe Brady tells you no, and Cliff Kingsbury decides to stay in Washington instead of taking your job, and Kellen Moore may not think it's the right situation, like, you continue to have coordinators tell you they're not bullish on your job. Otherwise, they'd all be lining up begging to take it. Instead, you got guys that you were interested in talking to saying, we're not interested in talking.
We've covered those situations. Cliff Kingsbury's getting paid like $10 million a year by Arizona. He's got Jane Daniels as his quarterback. He's got a very low-pressure situation compared to being a head coach. Good situation. Why rush anything? Okay, Joe Brady, very inexperienced. He thinks, I could be next year's Ben Johnson. I'll stick here in Buffalo, boost my resume a little bit. Maybe I'm not ready. A lot of circumstances. Okay.
It feels like, and again, this very well may and probably will end with them hiring Kellen Moore after the Super Bowl. But it feels very much and looks very much externally like an organization that can't make a decision, especially because the people they thought they were going to hire have told them no. With Aaron Glenn going to the Jets, Joe Brady deciding to stay in Buffalo. You don't get an interview with Kingsbury. He's staying put. So you have a pared down list of guys that were down your initial list, and now you got to decide, and they can't make a decision. That's not a great feeling from a leadership standpoint. I feel like that's where the Saints are right now. They'll just sit and keep waiting. Like, how do so many of you don't understand this? Like, how this works? I mean, I'm not trying to point fingers, but like, But I'm genuinely surprised by the amount of people pushing back, like, well, they can't hire him until after the Super Bowl. Right. Formally, but I just gave you an example a year ago with this organization of doing this exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just don't see I don't see it. I mean, I just don't see. Not every situation is the same. Not every person's the same. Not every job's the same. Like, if one situation is okay with leaking information or whatever, then fine. If the other one is not, then fine. To me, this seems like a well-calculated, organized, careful approach. I mean, I don't really see the negative. I don't see the negative in not leaking the story. If this does not work out to be Kellen Moore, we can revisit this and figure out, But if this ends up being Kellen Moore and he ends up being the head coach, then I see absolutely zero wrong with the approach. If the approach gets you where you need to be, if the approach lands you Kellen Moore as the head coach, I don't care if it's not leaked or like, doesn't the 9-hour interview, the agreement to have a second conversation after the Super Bowl, Rizzi going to Denver, McCarthy withdrawing, no one else is being interviewed. Like, doesn't all of that mean more than not having it leaked to Schefter? Isn't the unsaid saying more than, like, the literal tweet? Like, do you really need the Adam Schefter tweet to explain all of this other stuff that's happening over here? Like, can't you put the puzzle pieces together here? Or do you have to have Jay Glazer say, per sources, Kellen Moore expected to be the Saints' next head coach? I don't know.
With a coach that was coaching the Super Bowl. You have the deal in place, you leak it to Schefter, and then they're formally announced after the Super Bowl. Because they don't have their answer yet. And that's a problem.
What I do not think is happening is I do not think the New Orleans Saints are still deciding. I would put the chances of that at pretty close to zero. I do not think we are still in the middle of a triple threat match between Mike Kafka, Darren Rizzi, and Kellen Moore. I think the Saints have decided on Moore, obviously, since Rizzi's going to Denver and they're not having a second interview with Kafka or whatever else. I think it's pretty much good. I think they've pretty much decided. So the idea that they're still indecision with the front office, I don't buy into that much at all. And I mean, I am doing some assuming here. I am certainly doing some assuming and looking at some of the pieces and putting them together. And yeah, I guess it could be wrong, but everything that's happening seems to say otherwise. So I've said it all week long. I don't think there's any question what the Saints want to do. The question is, what does Kellen Moore want to do? Does Kellen Moore want the job? Is Kellen Moore going to take this job? That's what I'm worried about. I'm concerned about, does he want it? Will he take it? Will he accept? I'm not concerned about he wants it, but the Saints want to go with Rizzi. Or he wants it, but the Saints want to go with Kafka. If they go with Kafka or they go with Rizzi, it's because Kellen Moore turned him down. All right? So that's another indicator that there's pretty much a consensus for the Saints of what they want to happen here. And that's for Kellen Moore to be the next head coach. Especially if, like the Tom Pelissero tweet, Moore has been working on a staff. There's only one place for Kellen Moore to go, and that's the Saints. So if he is working on a staff, I mean, again, like, ladies and gentlemen, think about what we have here. 9-hour meeting, second meeting in place after the Super Bowl, just so happens to be when Kellen Moore can actually sign. Loomis informed other candidates that nothing is happening until after the Super Bowl. And there will be discussions with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore is working on his staff, and Darren Rizzi's heading to Denver. Kind of tells you all you need to know, right? So, I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you think that there's still indecision from the front office? Do you think, do you think the Saints are looking at Kafka or Rizzi? Or do you think they've kind of decided on Moore and we're just waiting until after the Super Bowl to get down to the nitty-gritty? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.